My name is Lauren Harkins. Yes, I'm Donna Weaver's daughter. Comes up. They asked me to teach this class because my husband and I are foster parents. And I will tell you that I came from a very safe background. Like, my parents are awesome. They could make a Hallmark movie out of my childhood. Like, I had a great upbringing. And I am and I'm also pregnant, so if I start crying, we're blaming the baby. To me, learning about traumatic childhood things was eye-opening. Some of the things that kids deal with these days regularly is insane. And then you put them in some of these special circumstances, it's even worse. It's crazy. But we're going to talk a little bit about how trauma affects the brain and how that might come out in behavior. I am a science geek, but I will try to keep this, I don't do biology, so I'm going to try to keep this in layman's terms because that's how I understand stuff better. You good?
Is there a handout?
There's not. We're going to do a little bit more discussion style, so I very much would like if you guys have something to say or have a thought, please go ahead and say it. That way I just don't feel like I'm sitting here lecturing you guys. But there are two types of trauma that a child typically will occur. Acute or chronic. So the difference is an acute trauma is something that happens one time. A kid changes schools. That's an acute trauma. We would think, oh, changing schools, not really a big deal. For a kid, that can be a really big deal. Yeah. So it can be something that losing a parent is an acute trauma. It is something that will affect you for the rest of your life, sure, but it happened one time. A chronic trauma is something that happens over and over and over again. So this one tends to be, your first thought tends to be abuse of any sort. It's something that this child has learned that is going to happen over and over and over again. Acute trauma will change the brain. Chronic trauma will damage it forever. Your brain is divided. You've all heard the right and the left and the creative and the logic. Mostly true. The upstairs and downstairs brain. It's also divided into upstairs and downstairs. When I say upstairs brain, I'm talking your frontal cortex lobe. This is where you make decisions. This is where you say, if I touch the hot stove, I will probably get burned. Therefore, I should probably not touch it. That logic thought process happens in your frontal cortex. It's executive functioning. It's, I'm going to give you 3 instructions, and you have to do the first one, and remember to do the second one, and then move on to the third one. That happens in your upstairs brain. Your downstairs brain is what's like your primal instincts. It's your adrenaline rush. It's your fight, or freeze. It's what happens when your brain says, I don't know if I'm going to survive this situation. Here's how I escape. And for kids who have experienced chronic trauma, they can get very easily caught in their downstairs brain. So what's happening in their brain when you present them with a situation is not step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not, if I do this, this will happen to me. It's, I don't know if I'm going to survive today. I must escape. With foster care, they talk a lot about food insecurities. A child who's experienced food insecurities has lower logic when it comes to food. For example, I'm hungry, it's 4:30, mom's making dinner, I can probably last a few more minutes. That's executive functioning, that's your upstairs brain. Most of us can say, oh, I can probably wait a few minutes, I know dinner is coming. Mom's never missed dinner before, and if I ask her, she'll probably feed me. That's upstairs, that's safe thinking. A child who's experienced food insecurities is going to say, yesterday I didn't get to eat dinner. The day before that I didn't get to eat dinner. I am going to flip out because I might not get to eat dinner. Their brain is going into, and you can say to them, I am making dinner right now. I just need 10 more minutes. And it's not gonna matter. Because to them, I need food, I am hungry, I'm gonna have to skip dinner. So the logic is not there. And I know that sometimes you guys have had these kids in your club. I went to a club that had foster kids in it. Foster kids are the epitome of obvious answer when it comes to chronic trauma. They've been removed from their home, which is a trauma. Even if their home was a terrible situation, being taken from what's familiar and put somewhere else is a trauma. Sorry. Like I said, we are foster parents, so we had these kids in our home. Even if the people who abused them, the people who neglected them, whatever it is a bad situation, being removed is awful. But some of the kids aren't, you're gonna look at them and you're gonna say, you look normal. You're living with your mom and dad. Things seem like they should be going good. Why are we disconnected? And you're gonna start to see the logical fallacy. To me, that's the easiest way to tell a kid with trauma. Their logic doesn't work like everyone else's logic works. Sometimes that's a learning disability or a mental disability or a special need of some sort. Sometimes it's trauma. And sometimes that trauma is not, my parents beat me. Sometimes that trauma is, I just changed schools and I'm overwhelmed. Yes.
I've had kids who, it's not that they've been taken out of their home, but the parent has been taken out. And they're either in prison or their families have split. That's traumatic.
A separation,
Right.
a divorce or just a separation is traumatic. There's nothing the kid did wrong. There's nothing innately unsafe about this situation. But this kid's entire world has just changed, and that's traumatic. When I was younger, we actually moved from Florida to Georgia. I was about 9. And my entire world changed. Like, I was used to, we came up here and I asked my mom why she bought me 4 pairs of jeans. Like, you don't need 4 pairs of jeans, you just need 1 when it gets cool. Like, I lived in South Florida. Like, I don't get it. What's going on? It's because my entire world had just changed. And that's somewhat of a silly example because I got used to jeans really fast. But that kind of thinking some of these kids have is, I really just don't get what's going on. Kids with trauma also tend to show higher in some of your special needs categories. For example, sensory processing disorder. Sensory processing disorder is not one of your major, it's not talked about as much it's not a learning disability, so it's not talked about as much like in school. But sensory processing disorder has a lot to do with overwhelm. A kid who is not used to loud noises, bright colors, quick changes, and that can be overwhelming. And when a kid is overwhelmed, then they'll start to act out. So the kid's not trying to be a crazy child. The kid is not trying to get on your nerves. The kid is trying to tell you that they don't know what's going on in their own body. Sorry, take a deep breath. So I kind of want you guys to sort of, have you seen some of this in your clubs? Have you seen it with the kids you work with outside of clubs? Some of it you'll know why, because you'll talk about it in small groups. They'll say, my dad just left. They'll say, I'm new, I just moved. Some of that they'll say. Most of the time, especially with chronic trauma, they won't say. They won't say. Because if they say, then they could get removed. And sometimes it's bad, and sometimes it's not what we would consider really bad. But remember, if you're 9, really bad has a whole different definition. So I want to see, have you guys seen some of these behaviors in your clubs? That hyperactivity, ADHD and ADD have a high link to trauma. Sometimes both acute and chronic trauma. They also are just happening a lot, but yes.
We had a little girl that was with her father, that her mother had left in Walmart. And every week she would tell this again, so I mean, you want to have compassion for the child, but you also want to help her see that you're beyond that. Or should you let her continue to vent that every week? I don't know. It's almost like she wanted to be known as the little girl who was left behind.
Yeah, so it's twofold. Trauma to the brain, like I said, it literally changes your brain. So it's not something that you can logically explain to a child and have them, oh, I see reason, let's change my behavior. So sometimes time is the only healer for some of that. Sometimes with a sense of abandonment like that, what she's trying to do is say, are you going to walk away from me too? And what she wants to know is that it doesn't matter what she does, you're still going to come back for her. And she probably doesn't even know that's what she's doing, honestly. So it kind of depends. What I will tell you, there is no right answer when it comes to the brain or trauma. It's kind of do the best you can given the situation. It also comes down to trauma, and being trauma informed is helpful. Showing the kid you're going to show up for them is the thing that will change for them. Showing them that you're going to come back for them every week, that you're going to remember their name, that you're going to ask them about what happened last week. That's going to make more of a difference than you will ever know. Because I'm going to go out and tell you, we have had 3 foster kids in our home, and if you were talking to them on the street, or I introduced, this is my daughter, let's just talk to a stranger, you would never know. You would never know. They're not going to say, yeah, I'm from this crazy place. Some of them will. Some of them will just straight up tell you, yeah, I'm in foster care, or yeah, my dad left, or whatever that it is. Most of them will not tell you. What they're going to do is they're going to show you through their behavior.
Sometimes you have to know, are they doing it for attention,
Correct.
or are they really hurting? And,
Yes, most of the time doing it for attention is hurting. They are hurting. They're not really showing it the right way, but they are hurting. The biggest reason, one of the biggest traumas on record right now is neglect. So you hear about abuse, and that's bad. But neglect is the same thing. It's the same thing. And a kid, it's harder to recognize, because the kid can be well dressed and fed and fully provided for, and a 2-parent household, and you're like, you've got it going, and still be neglected. And sometimes the parents aren't doing it on purpose. Like, I don't want to say all these parents are evil. Sometimes they're just not connecting with their kid. Sometimes a lot of things. But neglect often shows with attention. I want attention because I'm not getting it at home. And some kids need more attention than other kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a little boy at one school, and he had a sister in the same group. His sister was a 5th grader, and he was about maybe 3rd grade. And I had no idea what was going on with him. Later I found out that every day he got a beating. Every day. Because the mother hated the father. And the boy looked like the father.
yes.
He never told anyone. I could not believe it when it happened. But thank the Lord. He had a grandmother that lived out in Texas that took him and is taking care of him. I felt bad because I had no idea. He didn't act, he didn't let us know. The sister was in the same room with him, in the same club.
But she didn't get beat.
But she didn't ever get beaten.
That happens more than you know. I mean, and a lot of times it's not beating, it's being downgraded, it's being.
Verbally.
Yeah, because that happened to my husband, he wasn't abused, but he did remind of the father that left. And so it was like, you're like your dad, you're like your dad, you know.
Well, this one was physical.
Yeah.
And we are mandated reporters.
Yes.
And that's, all of us are, that we're working with children, so that's.
I don't, for you, mandatory reporting, I think it's in your, like, introduction to GNC thing you have to sign. Mandatory reporting is if you suspect abuse of any of any kind, or neglect of any kind, you can report it. You don't have to be sure. You don't have to be sure. And please don't ask the kid specifically, like, don't go up to a kid and say, is this happening to you? Is this true? Don't ask that. You do not have the training for that. I don't have the training for that. Please don't do that. Report it to your coordinator, which will talk to the counselor at school. They have the training for that, and they'll get the right people involved. I'd rather you report something that was nothing than miss something important because you were not sure. Don't go report, oh, he got a bruise, he fell in the parking lot, he must be, like, use your discretion. But if you're concerned, please say something. Please say something. Because you don't know, I mean, those kids can seem perfectly normal and you don't know, and then something will, like, feel funny. It will feel funny. I can't give you, like, better than that. Yeah. Do you know what time we're supposed to be done?
I'll do it. And on that reporting, they may have went over it, I'm in the school system, it needs to be reported immediately, like,
Yes.
you know.
You have
for us
24
to tell
hours,
us,
yeah.
Yes, if you hear about something in the morning, you need to go straight to the counselor. Don't discuss it with anybody else, and they will handle everything.
Exactly.
Now,
If
the
you can't
vice,
get to your coordinator, you can call the school and ask for the counselor.
the vice versa might happen, where the child goes to their counselor and says, hey, this happened to me in Good News Club.
Yes.
And
Which is
then-
why we have the
And then the
two.
church comes to you, or counselor comes to you, and you're like, did we really see that happen? You know, and you will play with your counselors at the schools. You know what I'm saying? You may have to role play at some points in times with them, because, you know, kids have an idea of what one thing is, and is it happening, is it not?
Right,
Is everybody's?
Well, I'm supposed to be restarting this. I'm not leaving, promise. Yes, which is why we have the 2 adult rule. Bathrooms are a major one for this. Please never walk into the bathroom with one kid. Like, just don't do it. You are setting yourself up for a world. It seems dumb. You do not need 2 adults to help a second grader go to the bathroom. Like, you don't. What you need them for is so that the kid can't come back and say, something happened to me in the bathroom. Yes. And kids don't understand the consequences of what they're saying. So if they've seen it on TV or they've seen it happen to a friend, something can happen. And sometimes the kid doesn't even know what they're doing is wrong. That's just what it's what they've seen. Sometimes they'll do it on purpose. So just protect yourself, and even though it feels like overkill. Is there any other, like, questions or things you've seen in clubs or with any other kids?
I'm a weekday preschool director at our church, and we had an instance where a preschooler was being abused in the past year. But like something that I think, like, one of the like we reported, like, suspected things, but like changes in behavior and things like that, like marked changes in behavior was something that was like a red flag.
Sudden change in behavior is a big red
bathroom
flag.
accidents where there weren't before and some
Yes.
things like that.
Yes.
So.
And sometimes if the school knows something's going on, or the kid's in a situation like foster care, you might know about that ahead of time. Sometimes, most of the time you won't. But sudden changes in behavior, issues with hygiene is a big one. The kids won't understand hygiene. That's gonna be a little bit something you probably don't deal with quite as much in the club, because it's a shorter time frame. And then body shyness, like if a kid won't take their jacket off. I don't jump too hard to the conclusion on that one. Some kids are just cold or they're just shy. Sometimes it can be they're having an issue with their body because of something else that's going on. So that one's tricky. And then patience, and I cannot stress this one enough. Kids with traumatic histories literally have brains that work different from other kids. It doesn't work. They'll get thrown to their downstairs brain in a panic situation. Something that seems relatively normal to us will panic them. They're not trying to be bad kids. Something is going on with them. And so patience is key because it's not gonna fix itself overnight. I listen to a lot of like former foster youth who've grown up in the system or who were adopted. They deal with this as adults. I mean, they're in their 20s and 30s, and they'll still get thrown to their downstairs brain at a moment when all logic says they're fine. This is not going to fix itself while you have these kids. These are not issues that we can overcome in 9 months. But what the kids will remember is how you reacted to what they did. They will remember, she loved me anyway. They will remember, she remembered my name. Like, you have no idea how important names can be to kids. She said my name right. She remembered what I said last week. She knows my favorite color. Like, those details that seem so tiny to us, it's huge. It's huge to these kids who don't have that somewhere else. And our teachers are awesome and they try, but they have a lot of kids. We have like 20. So we can pour into them on an individual level, I hope. That's my hope, at least. Learning things about what they do and don't like, those sort of things. Also learning styles. Some kids do better if they sit right here and they like dance like this, but I'm calm and I'm contained, but I'm like this. Like, if you asked my sister to sit still when she was a kid, she would spend so much energy trying to sit still that she would have no idea what you said to her. But if she could do like this while she was listening to you, she could probably quote you word perfect. Like, she could pay attention so well. I was jealous. She was a faster learner than I was. For me, if I'm trying to like logic things out, I'm gonna do this. This motion helps me. So taking some of those kids for whom hyperactivity is an issue and maybe setting them at the back of the circle so that they can wiggle while they're listening, it can be that simple. It can be that simple. I had a kid in club one time. You can't have the kids sit in your lap. Like, that's against the rules. Although that's what some of the kids will ask to do. But like I sat down and she just wanted to be right here. She just wanted to touch, just to know that someone was paying attention to her. She wanted to feel important for that little bit. And so like I sat on the floor and she sat right here and we paid attention to the lesson. So as the leaders, my other suggestion is don't sit at the back in a chair and talk to another leader. Sit with the kids. If the floor is not an option, that's fine. Sit in a chair. Like, I'm not trying to say hurt yourself. Please don't do that. Floors are harder for me right now than they used to be. But be there, because that's what the kids are also going to remember. They're going to remember your presence more than anything else.
I was going to say one thing of trauma that hasn't been mentioned is sometimes there's bullying.
Bullying.
From other kids. And sometimes you won't see it. Now, when I was a little girl, from the time I was in 4th grade to 6th, there was a little girl that bullied me all the way home from school.
Mm-hmm.
I walked home from school, and sometimes things will trigger that.
Uh-huh.
And still, I didn't mention it. I just, and I should have gone to teachers or whatever. So sometimes things are going on that you don't know about.
It's a rare kid that hasn't been bullied at least once in these days and ages. It happens so often. Triggers are another important one. If you can figure out a kid's trigger, I mean, good luck, that's really hard to do. But if you know what the trigger is, that can help you. So if you watch behavior and this kid they always go crazy at the same time every day, it could be because they're hungry. It could be, like what you do with toddlers, like you put them on this schedule because then you know when they're off the schedule, that's when they're gonna be crazy kids. It's the same concept here. Like if you can figure out this kid and that kid they don't get together because you're gonna have problems. Well then, easy fix, put them on different teams or something, right? So sometimes the triggers, I will tell you, most of the time, you will probably never figure out what the trigger is. It'll be something random, something minor, something, and you're just like, I can't figure out why this situation and that situation are the same. There's something, probably, but good luck. That was one of my biggest things. I'm like, I just figure out the trigger and then I can stop it from happening. You're not gonna figure it out. Any other questions, concerns?
I guess I would say that being involved as long as we've been involved and seeing kids come through the program, there's been years where it was like, oh boy, here comes, and then you're going to the next year and you're like, oh boy, he's on the list again, or she's on the list again. But there has been so many times that God has intervened in that child's life within the time of us being there, that at the end you're just like, what was the big deal? I just needed to see Jesus working, and not me, because I'm not, I'm still judging.
Yeah, and time doesn't heal all wounds, but time does help. And like you said, like we've seen it too. Kids that start out as the kid you really don't want in your class because they're just the bad kid. By the time they're in 5th grade and they're about to leave, you're like, no, don't go, right? Because you've seen this transformation. Time does help. Time and patience, yes. I guess the other thing is like, don't write off a kid. Because even if next year they don't come back, you have no idea what seeds you've sown. And I think it's going to be really cool someday when we all get to heaven and we say, hey, God, can you just tell me all the lives I touched while I was down there? And he's going to be like, oh, you want a list? And it's like a movie. I think that's what I hope for myself someday, right?
And I don't know how many times this happens, especially if we have kids in foster care and things like that, but I know with several kids that come to our club, the way we treat their kid touches that family.
Yes.
And they all of a sudden feel the warmth from us and open up and begin to, be open to the gospel, open to, we've seen that so many times.
Yes, we actually have a family in Good News Club whose kids started coming, and the parents were like, our kids are changed, they're happy, they're excited, they like this thing. So they started figuring out what was going on. They started going to church and saved their marriage. They were about to split. Saved their marriage because of Jesus. So Good News Club not only affected the kid, it changed the trajectory of the whole family.
That's awesome. And it
Yes.
happens, and you see it. I do see it in their faces when I start going down the car rider lane at the beginning of the year, and then like by the middle, like we're talking and
Yes.
loving on them, and they're like smiling, and it's just becoming more than just that child, it's the family, and then they know what we represent, and Christ is good for all of us,
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
I was gonna say prayer too. If there's a child, and I always, when I go to Good News Club or anything, is God, I can't love them, you love them.
Yes.
And there's, discernment, because I needed Jesus, I had a little boy when I was teaching school at 5th grade, and he was a terror. I'm just a little terror, but he did get saved that year. And years later, he moved off, and he came back to the church. It was a Christian school that I was teaching in, and he must have been 16 or 17, and I wasn't there any longer. I'd moved to Texas, and they said he came by and said, thank you for what you did.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the carpool time is it's just a continuation, and I always try to make a point of, if as you go through the year, you know who goes with who finally, and just try and say something positive to the parents about, especially the ones that I know, the parents probably don't hear a lot of positive
Yes.
about. And there's always something that you can say.
Smile.
Yeah, and it really, it makes a difference to the parents.
Well, and the parents know that you care about their kids
Yes.
when that happens. Yes, exactly. Perfect. And it's very hard to get annoyed by someone you're praying for. It's, yes. I also know my mom will call me, she's actively in a club, right now I'm not, but if she calls me between about noon and 2 o'clock on a club day, she goes, Lauren, I need you to pray for me. It's because she's had a really awful morning. She goes, something's gonna happen today. And we'll pray, and she'll go to club, and she'll call me about 4 o'clock, and she goes, we had 3 kids saved today. That's why everything went wrong this morning. That's why my computer stopped working right when I needed it to, right? That's why something awful, something that's like discouraging. So the devil will try to do that to you. And he will try to annoy, these kids will get under your skin. You'll probably have the kid who has the issue that you hate the most. Like for my husband, he can't stand disrespect. Like it's the one thing, like he's a very patient person, but you want to push his buttons, it's disrespect. All 3 of our foster care kids struggled with disrespect. Like God, the devil is going to put in your life the kid that's going to push all of your buttons. But I will tell you that the more you pray for that one kid, specifically by name, the more you love them, despite the fact that they push your buttons. Someday I'm going to be one of those little old ladies that just like has this direct line to God. Like I'm sure you've all met them. Like you have that person in your life where you're like, I have this giant decision. They're like, oh, I'll pray for you. And then like 2 weeks later, you're like, how'd you do that? Like, I've been praying about this for 3 months. How'd you do that? Miss Carol was that for me. She looked at me. I've been dating my husband for 2 weeks. And she goes, you're going to marry that man. Like, it's been 2 weeks. How do you know? I don't know. God told her. It's creepy, but it's awesome. Like, someday, I'm going to be that lady. But the way you get to there is you start praying right now. Is you start opening those lines of communication right now. The more you pray for a kid specifically by name, the more you love them without reason, the way Jesus does. So that's my other key. Is every time that kid annoys you, dear Jesus, I love them like you do, and then do it. It can be that simple. It can be that simple.
I don't remember that.
I can't tell you how many times I looked at my kid and I'm like, I'm gonna sit here for like 3 seconds and just, dear Jesus, please don't let me lose my cool right now. Dear Jesus, I love them like you love them.
Or sometimes I say, I don't love them like I love them.
Or help me love them like you
Yes.
love them.
Love the unlovable.
At the
Yes.
moment, I'm not
Yes.
there, but how do you get there?
Like, I don't actually love them, but I'm gonna pretend like I do because that's how Jesus would do it.
Yes.
And he's gonna work through me and I'm going to love them.
There you go.
Well, love is doing, not just feeling.
Yes, love is
So
a
when
choice.
you do good, ask Jesus to help you to know the good, and then you do it, then the emotions come.
I will tell you, the biggest takeaway I took from, we had a really, really rough kid at our house. And after they left, I looked at my mom and I said, I can tell you what Jesus had for me to learn. Like, I learned a lot of things about parenting and about kids and about everything. But I learned what it means to unconditionally love in a way that I have never had to learn it before. I've always loved my mom. I had a great childhood. I always loved my sister. Like, we fought, sure, but it was like minor sibling stuff, right? This kid, like, actively broke our window, like, trying to run away from our house. Like, this is not a kid that inspires love from you because they're adorable and they're so cute and they've been with me forever. Like, this is a kid that I had to choose to love. And it says in the Bible that God loved us while we were still sinners. Like, while we were as far away from him as is possible to be, that's when he chose to do something to show us he loved us. And that's what we're doing for these kids. We are choosing every time we go back into this club to love them the way Jesus loved us. And it will change you as much as it changes the kids. It will. We're out of time. So are there any other final thoughts, comments before we close?
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Very much.
If you don't mind, I'm going to pray for us before you guys leave.
Yes.
Great. Dear Jesus, thank you that you are here today, that you are surrounding us in your love. Thank you that you loved us while we were unlovable, Father, and while we were in the darkest places of our lives. And Father, I just ask and beg that you would show us how to love the kids, both the ones that are cute and adorable and we honestly love, and the ones that we don't, Father. And I pray that you would give us the endurance to run the race that it takes to continue to love these children day in and day out. Father, encourage us. Father, give us the strength to go back into these clubs, to love our children with all that we are, and to show them ultimately who you are, because that is the most life-changing thing we can do for them. It is the most loving thing we can do for them, is to lead them straight to you. And Father, I pray that that's what we can do this year at Good News Club. In your name I pray, amen.